One of the most respected institutions in Canada just came out against the Liberals and against CBC. We have breaking news, everybody. Mark Carney's bad week just got a whole lot worse. With the National Police Federation engaging its legal team over the CBC APT and quote-unquote prank show, the U.S. threatening to terminate a decades-old defense board, Carney's own caucus is now actively rising up against him, and the Royal Canadian Legion publicly siding with the RCMP. The pressure on Mr. Carney is now coming from every direction. Let's take a look. 14 Liberal MPs pen letter to Carney raising concerns over environmental backslide. Letter was sent to PM prior to latest pipeline agreement with Alberta. Liberal MP Stephen Guilbeault may be the most outspoken, but he's not the only member of his party unhappy with Prime Minister Mark Carney's environmental rollbacks. Carney signed a new agreement with Alberta Premier Daniel Smith last week that could see construction on an oil pipeline to the west coast start as early as September of 2027. It also includes a plan to increase Alberta's industrial carbon price, though at a slower pace than previously projected. 14 Liberal MPs sent a letter to the Prime Minister at the end of April, before the agreement with the Alberta government was even signed, to offer some recommendations, but also to express their unease with the situation. Despite signing their names at the bottom of the letter, the MPs do not want to be publicly identified, stating that their approach is intended to be constructive and respectful. Quote, "We remain deeply concerned. The government's credibility will be seriously compromised," end quote, said the signatories of the letter, which was obtained by Radio Canada. The 14 MPs come from across the country, including Quebec and British Columbia. Specifically in response to the concessions being granted to Alberta, the elected officials reiterated the importance of, quote, "supporting the clean electricity regulations," end quote. And more generally, they emphasized that, quote, "climate change remains the greatest threat of our time," end quote. At the time of writing, the Prime Minister's office had not responded to a request for comment. Bloc Quebecois calls on disgruntled MPs to speak out. The Bloc Quebecois is aiming to use the few remaining weeks of parliamentary sitting before the summer recess to convince Liberals who are sensitive to climate issues to speak out. Quote, "We will use all the parliamentary tools at our disposal to make the voices of those who haven't disappeared, who remain concerned about the climate crisis, heard," end quote, Bloc MP Patrick Bonin said in a French interview. So far, only Guilbeault, who left Carney's cabinet after the initial MOU Carney and Smith signed last fall, has publicly voiced his criticism of Carney's most recent proposals to weaken environmental regulations in order to attract an investor for a potential pipeline in Alberta. But Bonin said he hopes more Liberals come forward publicly. Quote, "We obviously hope that there are people within the Liberals who will stand up and say, no, you were not elected on a platform that is essentially the agenda of the oil and gas companies, which is currently being implemented," end quote, the Bloc environment critic said. So this is fascinating, folks. And we talked a little bit about this. This was mentioned on CTV by Vashi Kapelos that there was rumors of discontent Liberals across the country. We kind of forecasted that this might be a problem for Mark Carney because of that MOU when Stephen Guilbeault initially came out. And now this is starting to come to fruition. The cracks are becoming wider. Frustration is building. Now, some people may say, well, you know, they're saying that this letter is meant to be constructive and respectful. So was the first letter to Justin Trudeau, if you recall. Remember that? Remember that letter that came from the MP saying, Mr. Trudeau, we respectfully ask you to maybe kind of please resign before you send our party to oblivion. And Justin Trudeau didn't respond to that first letter. So the first letter is always respectful. It's always constructive. But it doesn't downplay what is actually going on behind the scenes and the conversations that are going on. Now, let's just do the math here, because the mainstream media and the Liberals keep pointing to Pierre Poilievre in that his party is fracturing. He's losing support everywhere. There's problems. MPs are leaving left and right. Well, let's do some counting. Chris D'Entremont, right? Michael Ma, Marilyn Gladue, and Matt Jenneru. So that's 4. Let's do the count for Mark Carney. Chrystia Freeland, Bill Blair, Jonathan Wilkinson, Nate Erskine Smith, and Stephen Jabot has left cabinet. And there may be some more MPs that are going to get so frustrated that they either move as independent, maybe they look to cross to the Bloc, because that's what I'm kind of reading into this, because they don't want to be associated with the oil and gas party, which Mark Carney is confusing everybody as to what the identity of the Liberals actually are. So you could actually potentially see some Liberal MPs crossing over to the Bloc. Maybe they resign their seats. Maybe they sit as independent. There's a lot of different possibilities over what is going on with this. And you have 14 MPs signing a letter. I don't remember 14 MPs on the Conservatives signing a letter saying they're not happy with Mr. Carney and that they want him to reverse course on something. I don't remember that at all. So just the basic math shows that Mark Carney seems to be having a lot more trouble managing his caucus than Pierre Poilievre is managing his. So this is where it gets really interesting. And I love the political play that the Bloc is making here, because they're obviously talking to the Quebec MPs that are on the Liberal Party that are having these environmental concerns. The Bloc tries to position itself as environment first. They're opposed to pipelines. They're opposed to, new mining and all of this stuff. So they're kind of out there almost playing the Liberal game, saying, you should be standing up for what you were elected on. You should be standing up and being more vocal, like Stephen Guilbeault. You should be doing that. What happens if Stephen Guilbeault actually moves over to the Bloc? Can you imagine that? That would be fascinating. Can you imagine what would happen if Stephen Guilbeault took some Liberal MPs with him if he moved over to the Bloc? Or even if he sat as an independent and took some with him? This is where things get very, very problematic for Mark Carney, because how do you maintain this narrative of everyone is in this to build Canada strong, yet you have almost 10% of your caucus now saying you're going the wrong way and we weren't elected to do this? This is the issue when you have Mark Carney acting essentially again like Justin Trudeau. You're trying to please everybody, and in pleasing everybody, you please nobody. You say you want a pipeline, but you don't want a pipeline, but you do want a pipeline, but you make it so restrictive that you may not get a pipeline. And so that signals to the environmentalists that you want one, just in the fact that you've kind of agreed to it, no matter the political chess that's going on there. But then when you don't get a pipeline, all the people that did want it, you're going to be irritating them at the same time. And the environmentalists are still going to be mad at you because you agreed to one in the first place. So this is fascinating chess that's actually playing out here. And Mr. Carney, again, he is the boardroom CEO. You do this and you do what you're told. Don't question me. I have my little inner circle, my C-level liberals. And I tell them what we do, and we discuss, and those are the only people that I take feedback from. Everybody else, sit down and be quiet. This is what happens, Mr. Carney, because these people don't really report to you. They're in your party, yes. They agree to be in your party, yes. But you're not their boss. You can't fire them. Only the Canadian people can fire them in the next election, or they can resign. You can try and kick them out of caucus, but you can't afford to do that right now. And this all comes back to what we were also talking about the power of these MPs in the Liberal Party right now in a fragile majority. It doesn't mean that the Liberal Party necessarily gets stronger. It means it becomes a lot more difficult for Mark Carney to manage that caucus, because these MPs know that this is a very close majority, and they know that every vote counts. So what happens if they say to Mark Carney, I don't like what you're doing with the environment, so maybe I won't vote on this next bill that you want passed? How about that? And how's Mark Carney going to respond to that? We already know that he doesn't like challenges to his authority. We know he doesn't like getting challenged with difficult questions. He's telling everyone to look inside themselves, or Point final. End of story. Period. First thing, second thing, last thing. Don't question me. So that's not going to be fun. And if all of this with this letter and these 14 MPs wasn't bad enough, one of the most respected institutions in Canada just came out against the Liberals and against CBC. Ladies and gentlemen, this was posted 14 hours ago at the time of recording this. The Royal Canadian Legion. The Legion supports the National Police Federation's request for an inquiry into this incident. The RCMP serves our country and must be treated with the respect it deserves. And this, of course, is related to the National Police Federation's statement on calling out the just insidious and malicious program that was being filmed to lure people under false pretenses, to lure RCMP veterans under false pretenses, promising them that Prince William would be there for a special ceremony honoring their service, only to then be completely humiliated and traumatized in front of what they thought was a live studio audience. And in that call from the National Police Federation, just to remind everybody, they said they demand to know everybody that was involved, for them to be named publicly, and everybody that was involved in the decision process for this, and for them to be named publicly. And now the CBC, they're in full-on panic mode because there's already enough questions regarding the CBC News regarding this, but now that there is this obvious political shadow game going on that is attacking only conservatives, this paints us in a really, really problematic spot. And initially you had the mainstream media basically saying, well, you know, it's just the opposition that had problems. It's just the conservatives that had problems with it. Well, you don't have that narrative anymore now, do you? You have the RCMP, the National Police Federation, and now the Royal Canadian Legion saying the conservatives are right to call this out because this is a complete farce and a complete disrespect of our institutions. So they're calling out Mark Miller, they're calling out Mark Carney, and they're calling the federal government to do something and to do something now. The question is going to be, what is going to be done on this? So Mark Carney, he has a dumpster fire of political problems going on right now. And it's not all in the same hemisphere. It's all over the place. So is this the beginning of the implosion of Mark Carney's government? I guess we'll see.